Good morning, everyone. I think we'll get started. The three of us have lots to say, lots we want to share, and we want to make sure that everybody else gets an opportunity as well. So now that you're all comfortable and sitting, before I even introduce ourselves, I am going to ask you to do something for me. So first of all, I'm going to ask you to stand. And then as I direct you, yeah, you can stand. I will direct you to sit down. So it's about what local means to you. If local is your backyard, please sit down. If local is 10 kilometers, please sit down. If local is 100 kilometers, please sit down. If it's your county or region, please sit down. If it's your province, please sit down. If it's Eastern Canada, please sit down. We don't have very many other people standing. Or if it's Canada, please sit down. So, and I think that's interesting. I think there's a lot of discussion about definitions of what local is, and I think it means different things to different people. So just keep that in mind as we progress. Okay.
There's still seats up here near the front if anyone want to come up. There's lots of seats here.
Brady, we want you to sit down. You fellows stand up. Come on. There's a seat right here.
No. There was. We're going to share the story, but
So just to explain the format, my name is Joan Brady, and I will introduce myself in a minute. And I'm joined by Alicia and Keltie, who are each going to be a presenter, and they're going to introduce themselves as we come to it. And our fourth presenter, Patrick Henderson from really local Harvest, is not here, but we will share the great information during our presentation as well. So my presentation, again, I'll just introduce you to my background and why I'm passionate about local food, talk about why local is important from various perspectives, what is a sustainable food system. So in this, the title of this session is Local Food, Small Farms, and Food Sheds, and my terminology is a food system rather than a food shed, but they are pretty much interlinked. And then just talk about some of those food system interventions that we can do to make some change. And then I've just brought some resources that I'd like to share with you. So who's Joan Brady? I am first and foremost a farmer. And I actually learned how to farm in the Annapolis Valley of Nova Scotia. I didn't grow up on a farm, so only an uncle will hire you when you know absolutely nothing. So thankful for that opportunity. I have quite a few relatives in the valley, and if you know the story about the septic tank, clothesline, and feed truck, you're probably related to me, and we should talk after the session. Anyways, this is my family, and we have a small operation in southwestern Ontario, Huron County, very rural, but by one of the sandiest, cleanest beaches in Ontario, so very tourist-oriented in the summer. I have been a food systems developer in Huron County where I live. Sometimes I'm paid to do it, and sometimes I just drive the train because I'm passionate about it. I have my own consulting business. Like many farmers, I have an off-farm job. That's 85% of farmers in Canada work off-farm. And because I live in a rural area, it made sense to be an entrepreneur, to work for myself. The other thing I'm passionate about, I'm a farm activist, and I advocate for farm families and rural communities, provincially, nationally, and internationally. I work with the National Farmers Union and the Via Campesina, which is an international organization. So what about local food? So first of all, from a farm perspective, local food is very important for entry-level farming. In my county, we have large farms, tens of thousands of acres. We have the most arable land in any county in Ontario, and the land value is $10,000 to $15,000 an acre. And so just the capital cost is totally ridiculous. So when we talk about local food and some of the inherent values, it's all about getting young people farming, because there's lots of innovation that we can do around local food and local production and local marketing and sales. Local food is a direct marketing relationship, and so we heard a little bit about it from Susan. She was talking about shared risk with community. So when we talk about a direct marketing relationship, we, the producer, have a direct relationship with the consumer, and we can share the story, we can share the information. Sometimes in the case of CSA and different things, we share the risk. We have a better opportunity to set the prices on a realistic cost of production. We really can't get into, you know, the different pricing between, you know, commercial, conventional farmers and things like that. But to me, especially from a farm activist point of view, we need to consider the economic cost of cheap food, that if we're not paying for it economically, we're paying for it socially and environmentally. And so local food in that relationship helps us realize the true cost of production. We also have more control of the value chain, and there's lots of economic benefit in that value chain, and there's lots of ways to, again, enhance community and environment through that value chain. It allows us also, you know, to collaborate as individuals and businesses and communities to fill some of our own needs. And then from a consumer point of view, direct marketing, there is an increased demand because of some of those inherent values, whether we are supporting farmers, whether we're supporting local local economies, or because you know, we really value the fact that we will have food production into our future. There's also the motivation that we want specific food. We want the story behind the food. We want to know what those production protocols are. And finally, from a sustainability point of view and a resilience point of view, we really do need to think about our food supply to the future. And the benefit to the community. So there's all kinds of studies out there about how, when we spend money in our community, how we benefit and how we multiply. And Michael Schumann, our speaker on Thursday and Friday, did a great report about some of the impacts and implications of shifting some of our production to local. And this one is just out. It's been out for a week. It's called Dollars and Cents, and it's a little closer to home about the Ontario food system. And basic premise is that there's actually 50% of the currently imported foods that we have the capacity to produce in Ontario. And so what would that look like from a GDP point of view, from jobs? But it goes further. It talks about some of the environmental impacts about food production, and it talks about energy as well. So later on in my slides, I actually have the link to this, as well as to an upcoming webinar. So you'll be able to access that on the conference website. Certainly there's economic benefits when we think about processing food. We think about tourism and culinary tourism. Local food enhances that. Food is often fresher, tastes a lot better. We had at one of the topic tables yesterday talking about why we support local food, and somebody says it tastes better. And it does, because it's fresher, and often it's healthier because we maintain some of those nutrients at optimum levels. Potentially, there's less environmental risk, you know, smaller scale management. You generally use ecological practices. When farm families live on the farm, they have a great deal in stake to their own environment. They live there, that's their community, they take particular care of it. And again, increased community resilience. But I did want to talk to you, and this is my NFU hat, about the local versus the global food system, because when we talk about relocalizing, we are reacting to the alternative, which is the global food system. And the reason that we focus on local is because this is where we have the most power within the local context. We don't have as much power within the provincial context, certainly not in the national context, definitely not at an international level. And so, you know, our values, we can, you know, make them work at a local level. And we need diversity. In my county, we produce the big three, soybeans and other edible beans, corn and wheat, acres and acres and acres. And we know, you know, from a biological perspective, how important diversity is. So from an economic perspective, diversity is also very important. So we need not only the size, but the kind of production we're doing. We need that diversity for healthy economies. And when we're talking about global food systems, we need to treat them and local food systems the same. Canada currently is an exporting country, and it will be an exporting country because we have those resources. But we need to feed ourselves first. You'll notice I sat down at Canada. I have a hierarchy of local. First of all, my backyard, then my community, then my county, then my province, then my region, then my country. And, you know, that's the way I try to make my purchasing decisions. So, and we need to take those principles around local and feed them into any Canadian food strategy. We've had some come down from a national level, and they don't really, they're not very congruent with some of our thoughts. So this graph I'm sharing with you is actually, it's agri-food imports and exports. So the top line is the exports. The next line is the imports, and you'll know that trading surplus has not changed. So any increase in import, we're replacing, or in export, we're replacing in import. And so we're doing an awful lot of redundant trade. And the bottom line is actually farm income on average, which, again, it is no benefit to farmers. And I would suggest, you know, we could look at statistics and see what kind of benefit it is to consumers as well. Okay, so just a brief introduction. We don't have a lot of time about sustainable local food systems. And so the key is, what are we trying to do? Sustainability, the definition is that balance between environment, economic, and social. The food system itself is those elements: production, processing, distribution, access, consumption, and waste. And that outer ring is actually some of the activities that we can do to affect the food system as a whole in order then to enhance some of those elements. Can I get back? Sorry. So this is just a quick slide, some of the activities in Huron County, just based on some of those elements of the food system, and I will go through some of them a little closer, but just to give you just a quick snapshot. So one thing I'd like to tell you about is a distribution piece. So first of all, we have adequate production, but then how do we get it to where it needs to go? We have that direct consumer relationship, sometimes at the farm gate, sometimes at the farmer's market. But how about some of those other customers? So in the north of our community, we actually have a Mennonite community. And what they have done is they put together a wholesale auction house. So they have the capacity, they have the land, they have the labor, they have the knowledge to produce the food, but their big challenge has been transportation. So they've built the auction house, and now we go to them. And so larger, vendors at other markets supplement their own growing product with this product. Other farm gate sales, myself included, I buy their product and sell it at the farm gate, whereas I don't necessarily produce something, but the consumer is looking for. local caterers, local restaurants, the local grocery store. It is wholesale prices. So again, but it's that shared overhead and large lots. So sometimes we have consumers that get surprised at the number of beets they're taking home that week. So. And it's a tri-weekly auction. So again, it's all about getting that food when it's optimum to the customer. And so it's just a great model. Again, it takes a great deal of cooperation, and the community, it started slow. So they did with some poor prices initially, but are starting to really, meet their goals around pricing. So this is just some of the industry processors in Huron County, and I think this that we got last night is a great representation of what's happening here, all within 10 kilometers. And we have two kinds of processing, really. We have producers that are value-adding their product, and so Valley Mushrooms or Keltie Brothers produce, they might do some additional handling and packaging in order to meet the market expectation. And then Dauben Family Meats is actually a processor that other farmers, rely on in order to value add their product. And I just did want to say, as I was traveling to the province, I met with some ladies in Truro, and I work with them on an international level. They're part of the Women's Institute, and the NFU were members of an international rural organization, and they had concerns around the meat processing sector and some of the conversations that are happening right now. And so I guess what I just want to instill in this crowd, how important this infrastructure is. If we don't have that slaughter capacity, we don't have a fresh steak anywhere. And it's all about balancing. Food safety is very necessary, but it's again, there's all kinds of issues around definitions and customers and handling and everything else, and there's different scales and scopes. And so I'm just going to encourage you to push back a little bit, because it is very important to our conversation around local food. Okay. And then access and consumption. So access and consumption is about where we're getting the food, but sometimes it's also how we get the food. And again, from my farm perspective, sometimes it's hard for me to hear the term affordable food. Again, food comes with cost. If we're not meeting it, it's being, relayed somewhere else. But then at the same time, I work on an international level with the United Nations, and food security across the world is, it's a real issue, and it's hard to see hunger. But I think the term that we need to remember is the means to afford. And again, it's all about balances. And then waste. This is something that we haven't really talked about in Huron County, but it's huge. The United Nations has a study that 50% of the food is wasted. So Sobeys store, 50% of that food is wasted. If you walk by their dumpster, you know what it smells like, right? And so, what does that mean for the price of food, number one? What does it mean for the billions of people we're going to add to the earth in the next few years? How can we, and that's what local food is, and that's what community contracts are, grow what we need. And so around that whole conversation we had this morning about sufficiency, so those kinds of ideas. Less packaging, we can certainly do with less packaging. Reuse. How about those secondary products that we used to use? The wool. Is there a market for wool anymore? Leather, seconds, we need that processing infrastructure. And how about recycling? When I see all the stuff that leaves Huron County that doesn't get processed there, we also don't retain that organic matter that we can feed our soils with. It goes somewhere else as well. And so, those are other aspects. So that's kind of the elements of the food system quite quickly. And this is some of the work that, and some of the things that I've been working on in Ontario, is how do we kind of affect the food system as a whole. And we've kind of come up with, it's a wheel, it doesn't necessarily progress, but first of all, I think this is the start. It's about collaboration. It's about getting everybody to the table, whatever their food system element is or interest is, let's talk about it. And then there's a vision piece. What do we need it to look like? And that vision can be the start, but it can also be part of the strategy and action. And we just finished a food charter for Huron County. I brought some copies. They're sitting here. And it's based on our food system. And so we kind of talk about some of the values that are important to us. So that's just an example of a vision. Asset mapping. I love that comment this morning that, Nova Scotia is portrayed as being a have-not province, but we're rich in all the things that matter. And so that's what it is about, asset mapping. What's there? What can we build on? Are there some gaps that we need to, those leverage points that we can work with? And then strategy and action. What are some of those actions that we can take? And then policy change, because it is huge. And I brought something else along that you're welcome to have, something we developed, and it's the Healthy Rural Lens for Huron County. And basically, it's just a tool to say, remember what a rural place looks like, what are the challenges when you design policy, think about those things. Mm-hmm. We use it internally, but it's our hope that the folks in Toronto will pick this up and really look at it and think about what rural Ontario is. So there's some of those available as well. So again, this is a very quick introduction to these things. Just some resources. This is a very general introduction to local sustainable food systems that I wrote. It's on the HC Link website. It's available. We are developing a database of resources on sustainable local food systems. It will be housed on the FoodNet Ontario website by the end of this month. The dollars and cents report, there's actually a webinar with the authors. Again, anybody can register for a webinar if you have a phone line. And then there's the link to the resource itself. And that's it for me. So I'm going to turn it over to Alicia.
No. Yeah. Super. Can everyone hear me? I don't have a
Oh,
mic.
do you want to trade spots?
No, I think it's fine.
No,
It's picking up?
We're,
Yeah.
we're recording, so you really
right.
do want it in front of you.
Okay.
So you can hold it there, or you can move it the whole mic down. Which way would you like?
How's this? Okay.
That's great. That's
Georgia, you can hear me in the back? Okay. Thank you. So my name is Alicia Lake, and I've been kind of part of this local food system, I think, my entire life. I was actually, I want to say raised on a small subsistence farm, but the truth is I was born on that farm. So I was kind of born into it. And over the years, I've been involved in a lot of different local food initiatives. Keltie will talk about a few of those in a few minutes. But I think that this is the most exciting project that I've ever been involved in, this one that I'm going to talk to you about today. So it's probably good that I'm holding the microphone so I don't make too many gestures and hit these guys. Okay, so let's see if it works. So just to lay out some of the context for you, everyone here familiar with Cape Breton Island, where that is? You may call it the Far East. We call it the masterpiece of Nova Scotia. So Cape Breton Island is about 10,000 square kilometers, which is about 19% of the land mass of Nova Scotia. We have about 130,000 people. Right now, we may have lost a few in the last couple of days, I don't know. About 75% of them actually live in one county. So we have five municipal districts in the entire island, but 75% of the people live in one county. what's really interesting about Cape Breton is that we have a really kind of challenging geography. So we're a small place, but we have highlands, so it's really difficult to travel to some places because of the mountains. All of our roads are twisty. We don't have one straight road, I don't think, in the entire region. And we have a lake right in the center of the island. So that creates a lot of difficulty traveling. And also what it's done is it's really kind of created some, I want to say like social diversity / isolation. So we are really not great at sharing information around the island. So that really hurts us in a lot of different ways. But, so those are kind of our challenges. But we have a lot of opportunities in Cape Breton. We actually, 100 years ago, were a net exporter of food. We were kind of a breadbasket. We exported lots of food to other parts of Nova Scotia. So we have a real strong history of food production. We have a lot of people that still understand food production, really have a strong connection to our land and also to our fisheries. And over the last few years, we've had a huge increase in the interest in local food and how that relates to our local economy. So we've seen some festivals, we've seen restaurants really taking up with this. People, we've grown from having, I think, 1 farmer's market to maybe 9 in about 5 years in Cape Breton.
Yeah, that's quite a lot.
Yeah. There, she has a math. So there's definitely an increased interest. So these are kind of the foundational reasons of, why we needed a food hub. So here we go. So getting into, the founding of a food hub, just like any other process, this was a really long process. So in 2012, we brought together a group of producers, and they had lots of discussions about the challenges and mentioned all these things, right? How do you distribute food across the island when it's going to take you 5 hours to drive there? And, how do we even get the communication out? How do people even know what's available? And in a lot of cases, people really don't. So, we have restaurants that are telling me that they're taking crab off their menu, even though we are one of the largest crab producers in the world. And they cannot source it, even though it's 2 hours away. So there's these issues. So from that meeting in 2012, which was mostly all producer-based, there was a food security committee put in place in one of our counties, Inverness County. And then in 2013, we kind of brought together a wider group of people, cast the net out, had some people that work in health, universities, again, producers, but we also added fisheries and a lot of different groups together, had another session, really kind of a think tank / potluck, which I think is the best way to go with any of these events. And what was really clear from that session is the need for coordination. Everyone said, there's really no one working on this. How are we supposed to make any traction when everyone's working alone? There's just no coordinated effort. So at that point, the Food Security Committee with some other people decided to pursue a, sorry. Do you want me to hold it?
Stand.
Okay.
There's a lot of breath noise. You're holding it beautifully. It's perfect for you.
I'm messing it up? Okay.
No, you're not. No, I didn't say that for you.
No, okay. I get excited and then I just get...
It's wonderful.
Yeah, okay. Now I have my hands. It's great. Watch out. Watch out.
Stand back.
Okay. You can still hear me in the back, Georgia? Jill? Okay, great. So getting back to it. So that committee put together this proposal to Department of Agriculture. There was... Everyone you can imagine wrote letters of support for this, the university, retail stores, restaurants, lots of producers. Everyone said, we really need coordination. So it took some lobbying, it took a lot more efforts, and then finally in 2014, Inverness County was awarded some funding to kind of start up a food hub initiative. So I was hired, I think the last week of October in 2014. So this is a brand new process. So I'm just going to talk about, there we go, kind of the nuts and bolts of what we're trying to do. So there's literally hundreds of food hubs across North America. If you Google food hub, you'll see them. The thing that they all have in common is that every single one is totally different. I mean that. But basically, food hubs deal with aggregation, marketing, some type of processing or middle component, and then distribution of local food. So it's really about strengthening those connections and rebuilding that middle infrastructure that we've really lost through all the things that Joan was talking about. So with our food hub, we we kind of set out to really do a consultative process. So we talked to all kinds of restaurants, producers, everyone. We had consultation sessions in January in Cape Breton. It went better than you would think. Mostly just because people are so interested. But we had, we had everyone, like from lobster fishermen to restaurant owners to people that make chocolate. So this is something that everyone is really, really interested in, and everyone came out. And then I had a lot of conversations with different food hubs from all over the US and Canada. I went to Guelph, actually. I almost met her, but it didn't happen. So we decided to work on a model that's a multi-stakeholder cooperative. So we'll have members that are producers and members that are consumers kind of working together, creating this vision of a stronger food hub, a food system. And we're going to do kind of a virtual hub. So we're working with actually Tonkin here from Harvest Hand to develop software that can kind of manage this logistics piece. And then we're partnering with a trucking company to actually do the distribution physically. So it's really a virtual hub. And I think that's, partner for, do what you do best and then partner for the rest. So a lot of what my role is marketing and really getting the message out. But anyway, I will keep moving on, but hopefully answer more questions about how this will work as I go. So as far as the governance piece kind of goes, what's really interesting about this project, and I've been hearing it just this morning in the plenary and here with Joan, is partnerships are the key. And with this project, I think more than anything, the reason I really have a lot of faith in this project is that we have so many different stakeholders coming together to make this happen. And that's something that hasn't really happened in Cape Breton before that I know of, right, of having all these groups come together. So it was funded by Department of Agriculture, but all the municipalities in Cape Breton are putting money behind this. They all, supported this proposal when it went into Department of Ag, and now they're going to put money behind it. We have, conversations with ACOA about further down pieces, and I'll talk about that. And also we have, community health boards. But then we're working with all these other partners, from Ecology Action Center to Health Board, the university, delivery trucks. So it's really about, gathering up all the resources you can, finding ways to work for a common vision, but really we can't do everything, right? So we have to bring in other people. So the significance, I think, is kind of, for me, it's twofold. So obviously I'm an MBA, so my primary concern always is, creating an economic impact. So making sure that farmers have more money at the end of the day. Making sure there's more money rolling around in our economy. But the other huge part of this is partnerships, right? So we really need to strengthen up our communication, the way that we work together, the way that we find common goals and find common solutions. And I think that with the Food Hub being kind of this centralized point, it's an entry point for everyone. And I think that's one of the more important, processes, right? Is that it's creating stronger partnerships and more financial money, hopefully. So of course, talk about hurdles, and people say to me, "Aren't you scared? What if it fails?" This is the big question. For me, no. I think the only way we can be totally risk-free is if we just don't do anything, right? Just sit down and just don't do anything, and don't worry about it, right? And of course, we're going to have challenges. We're probably going to mess stuff up. Absolutely, that's going to happen. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid if this project ends up being something different in a year. Maybe it doesn't work the way we think. Maybe it'll be something else, but it's all part of the process. And I think that's it. Like when we're creating change in our communities, we just have to do something. We have to get the ball rolling, and it can morph and shift, doesn't matter. We have to be working in the right direction, and we have to be doing things we feel are right, and things will come together. So there are challenges that I'm already facing, right? And how do you get around these? And I think I love this diagram because there's lots of different ways. We don't always have to jump over them. We can find ways around. We can work around things. Probably one of the biggest issues, though, I think that we're facing is this kind of burnout, right? And I think all our communities are feeling that, right? We've seen so many things fail. We're getting exhausted, and we're really losing our spirit. And that's something that I hope we can really change, because we need a resurgence. We really need to rally and say, okay, one more push. We can do it. Come on. So as far as possibilities go and where we go from here, I mean, from my perspective, the possibilities are always endless. We can do anything if we set our minds to it. I think with starting out with this type of a model of having a virtual hub, partnering for everything, really creates something that's scalable. So as we go along, hopefully this is really successful and we'll start building up that center. And then maybe we're going to look at issues like what Joan was talking about around processing and storage facilities and warehousing and this type of thing that is missing in our middle infrastructure pieces. So I think there is this idea that we can gradually go down this road, identify things. I love what you say about the vision doesn't have to come right at the beginning. It can be identified as you're going along. So what else is needed? How do we work with that? And how do we work with partners to kind of keep building that up and tightening that up? So who knows? But we'll see what happens. So this is one of the last things I want to talk about is how this project really, I think, complements the other great things that are going on in our local food system. So this is not meant in any way to replace what the farmers markets are doing or what Ecology Action Center is doing or what anyone else is doing. This is really about strengthening up, excuse me, and working with each other, right? That's kind of how it kind of has to happen. And there's a lot of great things already happening, even, Federation of Agriculture is really strong, doing a lot of great things. Department of Ag does a lot. So it's really about building kind of that network and that entry point to really get everybody working together, make sure we're all working in the same direction. So I'm just going to have a drink of water, and then I'm going to leave you with my last thing.
That slide.
It's a great slide. And eventually, when the snow melts, we might even have garlic scapes. Okay. So this is the last slide that I'm going to leave you with. And this is my favorite slide of 2015. And it's changed the world 3 times a day. So all of us in this room, all of us everywhere are constantly talking about all the problems and how do we change the world? And we all want to do it. I know we do. And I think with food, this is an opportunity you have 3 times a day. Every single day, 365 days a year, you can make a choice that makes a difference. You don't have to be crazy like me and eat everything locally. Keltie will talk about that. But it's all about this opportunity. It's such a great opportunity to make small choices and just to think about it, right? To think about how our small impacts of what we put in our mouth impact our whole communities, our environments, our economies, everything about us. So this is your challenge and your opportunity every time you eat. 3 times a day, 365 days a year. Think local. Thank you.
I'm getting hungry. All right. So we're going to start with a bold statement that I think you'll agree with. I know the ability of food to bring people together and to build community. So to say that again, I know the ability of food to bring people together and to build community. I'm a part-time market gardener, and I'm the executive director of the Farmers Markets of Nova Scotia Cooperative. My passion is connecting people with their food and connecting people with each other. You might say that's my why. I'm going to use that sort of term a little bit, why. I have no doubt that in this room, at this conference, in this region, people are driven by their why. And I know that farmers markets are bursting with why. And the great news is, I flipped, don't I?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's a whole nother component. So the good news is that Nova Scotia is bursting with why. So anyone who's traveling through Nova Scotia or is from Nova Scotia, you're welcome to grab one of these maps of all of our markets. So we are home in Nova Scotia to the greatest number of farmers markets per capita in Canada. I'm going to repeat that again. We are home in Nova Scotia to the greatest number of farmers markets per capita in Canada. From Yarmouth to Cape Breton, there are more than 40 farmers markets, and within them, more than 1,500 businesses. And I think I remember the Ivany report mentioning something about entrepreneurship, so I think that's a good thing. Visiting any one of Nova Scotia's over 40 farmers markets, and you'll feel the experience of food to bring people together and to build community. So instead of describing that to you, I welcome you to visit a farmer's market in your community or one in Nova Scotia while you're here. And And I invite you, when you're at the market, I encourage you to do your grocery shopping, to do your gift giving, to do your impulse buying. Just go for it. And that's what I'm going to talk about here today, the customer side of the equation. So last summer, a handful of individuals involved in the provincial local food movement here in Nova Scotia, we found ourselves dreaming up a big idea and turning it into a province-wide initiative, the 50% Local Food Club. So let me start from the beginning. And the beginning is actually Alicia Lake. So as you now know, Alicia is a fantastic local food advocate in Cape Breton. And about 3 years ago, Alicia decided to spur conversation and action by committing to a very local diet for 1 month. And she shared her experience on her blog. And it got people talking, and it got people inspired. So a year later, Alicia decided to invite her community to join her in eating a very local diet for a month. And people did, many people did, and it continued to build. But like with training for a marathon, it's important to approach the challenge with others, with some support. And so Alicia hosted potlucks, she hosted get-togethers, she hosted conversations. She created helpful resources. So this is just one on frugal local food ideas. So she created resources, she facilitated the sharing of recipes, and she invited people to shop at their local farmers market, to buy direct from local farms, and to ask for local at their grocery stores. She invited people to talk about the challenges of sourcing and eating locally, and most importantly, she brought people together to celebrate food and to celebrate community. Last summer, Alicia and I got talking about the Cape Breton Local Food Initiative and the possibility of making it province-wide. We got excited, lots of hands moving, but to reach from Cape Breton to Yarmouth, we knew that we needed partners. So we reached out to other local food advocates that we often partnered with or worked with on different things. And we formed a small committee to handle logistics, to foot the bill on small things like graphic design and some printing. And we put a call out to other local foodies and community builders across the province, asking them to volunteer their time to help us host events, potlucks, and gatherings in communities across the province. In planning, we landed on a commitment of 50% local. And it's kind of interesting because Joan had mentioned the 25% shift, and I've also heard certainly of the 10% shift. So why did we go for 50%? Well, first and foremost, the goal of the 50% Local Food Club was to increase purchasing and consumption of locally grown food here in Nova Scotia. So we knew we needed a number that would make an impact. But we also wanted it to be accessible to people and to people who weren't yet connected to the local food movement or to the farmers market movement in Nova Scotia. So we thought 50% was just the right number. And then here's what we said to Nova Scotians, to eaters, to media, to anyone who would listen to us. And we just sort of described, so this September marks the start of something wonderful, the first annual Nova Scotia 50% Local Food Club. Whether you're already passionate about eating locally or new to the idea, be a part of this awesome initiative. How? Great question. The first step is to register, making the commitment to source 50% of your diet for the month of September locally. From there, browse the website for recipes, retailers, and resources. There's plenty, including events across the province, to bring folks together. Bon appetit. So that's what we said. And the invitation was to all eaters, to families, to educators, to schools, to businesses. We had a library in Cape Breton, to rethink their relationship with local food. And it was a challenge to community leaders as well, to elected officials, to government, to consider how best they could support the growing local food movement, and how they could put more food on their table and on the table of their constituents. So in planning this initiative, we thought about targets. How many people could we reach? How many people would make the commitment? We also thought about how to get attention. We decided to harness community leaders across the province. So we reached out to community leaders directly, and community leaders can mean so many things: musicians, artists, the movers and the shakers, the gossipers, and some elected officials. And we actually had very good success with elected officials in the province. And so that was part of our strategy, to reach out to them, especially to those we had relationships with, and then to ask them not only to participate, but then to promote that they were participating and to call on their colleagues to do the same. So just to mention a few of those people, Mayor Pam Mood of Yarmouth, who's a fantastic advocate for her whole community. She's really changing the idea of Yarmouth, and she's a huge farmers market supporter and shopper. And so she was a quick early sell. And so she called out to other mayors across the province. So the mayor of Halifax joined then, which was fantastic. The entire town council of New Glasgow joined. And it came from an authentic relationship, a real commitment to their local farmers market. They are involved in their market in so many ways, simply as shoppers, but also much more. And the Provincial Minister of Health and Wellness, Leo Glavine, I happened to have a meeting with him, and I mentioned it, and he was really keen on the idea. And for him, it was all about his grandchildren and what they eat and what they would have the opportunity to eat as they got older. And so not only did he sign up, but he wrote a newspaper article about why he was signing up. And in that article, he asked other ministers across the province to participate. So other ministers sort of had to. And many did, including the deputy premier. The premier was actually going to be out of the country, so he felt he couldn't logistically make that work.
But he had dinner with me.
Did he? Yeah. So we targeted these individuals, as I said, as a way, and then we reached out to media. We shared why we were doing what we were doing, and we shared why these community leaders were joining and doing what they were doing. And this was very effective, and the media embraced our good news story. But really our target was to reach Nova Scotians. So targeting these community leaders and elected officials was just a way to get to Nova Scotians. And so one other aspect of our strategy was to get attention for this initiative was to focus on our why, on why we were doing this, and not to get caught up too much in the debate of what is local. So I love that Joan opened us up by asking, what does local mean to you? And so we had a lot of conversation about what local meant, and then we sort of decided, we don't really need to define it. That's not really the point of what we're doing. And so instead we decided we'd each share our why, or our what local means to us. And so my local was knowing the stories behind the food. And Natalie Smith, who's a farmer's market advocate and now works with the town of Yarmouth, she's here as well. Her local was knowing her farmer and how they produce the food. And Alicia's, you're a little shadowy there. Yeah. Local is knowing and trusting who the person who produces your food. And this is the CAO from New Glasgow, and she said being proud of our local economy and knowing the producer by name because it matters. And so for other people, they did have a geographic answer to that, and that's great too. But the point was that it wasn't about defining local. So from there, to join the local food club, individuals, families, groups were asked to register, and we did that through a simple website that we created. And Duncan, who already got to raise his hand through Harvest Hand, he had a hand in helping make that happen too. And it was really quite simple and almost free to do. And there was no cost for anyone to register. We just wanted people to register so that we could track our success, so that when we did this again, we could track how much better we did. But when people signed up, we did ask them a few questions. We asked them where they were in the province, and we asked them their motivation for participating, and we asked them a bit about their food habits, so we could find out if we were impacting or making change. And on the website, we stocked the website with resources, things like the frugal local food resource and 30 days worth of relevant recipes. So great recipes that a summer student who had a background in nutrition created for us, which was awesome, or put together for us. So by registering, participants were notified of on-the-ground events taking place in Nova Scotia, and they were invited to be part of the 50% Local Food Facebook group. And that was very active, and it was just another way to stay connected. And so this is just a picture of the Black Rock Bistro, which was one of the restaurants that held a special event as part of the 50% Local Food Club. So there were restaurants that participated in various ways. One of the restaurants in Cape Breton gave 10% off. They were a local food-focused restaurant. My parents ate there 4 times during the month. But this is a restaurant towards in the Amherst area. So that sort of lays out the idea and how we brought it to life. I think the simple act, one thing I did want to say, and it actually came up for me when I was in a session yesterday with Keltie from the Halifax Tool Library. And she talked about the importance with a new project or idea of giving it an identity. It's almost that, talking about it makes it a little more real. And then if you can add an image or a logo or a tagline, it makes it even more real. And we definitely experienced that. Just by giving it that, it had a certain amount of legitimacy and shareability. And so that, I think, is a very effective tip for so many projects that you might want to do in your community. So let me tell you a bit about how the initiative went. So first, this is a map of those who registered, where they were, whether they registered as a family or an individual. And then we decided it was important to evaluate for our own sake, but also to share with those who participated the success and how it works. So we did create little postcards. And I have some copies here with me, but the front shares that these number of registrations per county in Nova Scotia, and we had over 3,000 people all across the province participate. So the spectrum where people were from, we were really happy with, and we were really happy with 3,000. I mean, we want that to grow, but we were really happy with our first year, and it was all ages. The next slide has some ages there. So, but we have some ages where we'd like to, target and get more people participating, certainly. And the majority of people registered as a family, and so that'll come in when we get down to a couple of recommendations. So I think the next important thing is what motivated people to participate. What was their why? And so this is a bit on the motivation side. And generally speaking, there were three main reasons that sort of got talked about and spoken about a lot, and that was to support local businesses and producers, to enjoy healthy food, and to help raise awareness about the importance of eating local. Other reasons include a desire to learn and educate others, to develop a better understanding of their own habits, to teach children. And so I was curious to know what people were purchasing. So I often, in the farmers market world, talk about gateway items to the farmers market world. So the gateway drugs or the gateway items of the farmers market world, in my opinion, are farm fresh eggs, delicious carrots, and, bacon, personally, if you're a meat eater, but Nova Scotia apples. I mean, the variety you can get at a farmer's market, you could never find in a grocery store. So we did ask people what were some of the main things on their list, and this shows by size what people seem to be buying. Let's talk about the lasting impact, or if there was a lasting impact. So this is a bit of a chart on how people, and how change happens, I guess, in behavior. So first, on the awareness level, the messages we shared through the local food club had a wide reach through media attention and through word of mouth. During the months of August and September, our website had more than 20,000 views by more than 5,000 different people. The Facebook group had a group of 845 individuals who were actively participating, and 3,000 Nova Scotians registered. So what did they learn? Here's a bit about what they learned. And certainly a lot of it was just learning what was available locally and where to find it. And then we wanted to know more about behavior change. So was this going to have a lasting impact? So we did surveys with participants afterwards. Thinking through this idea of behavior change. And so based on the surveys of people afterwards, there was a shift. We saw a shift in people's buying habits from large-scale grocery stores to shopping at farmers markets, plans to grow their own food, and buying direct from producers. This suggests that participants were continuing their commitment of local food beyond the month-long initiative. And survey responses also suggested a shift in the amount of local food being eaten by participants following the local food club. And after participating in the initiative, fewer participants said that they were not actively sourcing local foods on a regular basis. So the next piece was wanting to know what our impact on producers was. And to be honest, this was something that we didn't plan in to the design beforehand. And so on that, we don't have numbers. We talked to a few farmers just to say, kind of anecdotally, did your customers mention this? Did they seem to know about it? Did you have increased sales? But really, we have nothing statistically true. But what I thought I would share quickly was just, this is an economic impact study that we did in Nova Scotia on the impact of farmers markets in our province, looking at the spending habits. And I have some copies if anyone's interested. But what we found with that was that, I think I'm missing something. Oh, no, sorry. What we found was that during the main season in Nova Scotia, over 55,000 adults are visiting our farmers markets each week. And then there's lots of kids as well, but they don't tend to have as much money in their pockets. On average, each individual is spending $16.50 at the market. And in some communities, that's as much as $25. It's a lot to read off a slide, but I do have copies. So in Lunenburg, the average market customer, it's a Thursday market year-round, is spending $23.87. And we also looked at what they were spending at surrounding local businesses. So it gives us a hard numbers idea of what the impact of this farmers market is. And I think this is rural economic development at its best. Another quick example would be the Mabu Farmers Market in Cape Breton. So this is a community of around 1,200 people, where over $10,000 was spent at the market in just one market day. Then looking at Pugwash, Nova Scotia, where they have a local population of around 800, and then certainly some summer dwellers who are big components, a big part of the farmers market there. And you can see, their numbers, the impact that they're having. Great. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly share. I thought I was going to be the fast one.
I let you down.
So basically, our intention is certainly to do this again. And we're glad to hear from people who participated that they're interested in doing it again. And hopefully it'll be even easier because they've kept up with some of those habits. But we did look at some recommendations. So given the number of families involved, we definitely see speaking to kids and to families as a really important step. And the education side of things. So that people know how to handle that kind of food. And the main other recommendation was around hosting more events on the ground. So, there were some things that happened across the province, but we didn't have as many things happening on the ground as we wanted. And people wanted that support, and they wanted that coming together, not just virtually through Facebook, but in person. So that's a piece of what would happen. I'm just going to end with a quick story from Cape Breton, also where I'm from, and it's just an indulgence here. So this is Jeremy White, and he's part of his team, and he's the owner and operator of Big Spruce Brewery in Nyanza, Cape Breton. And first of all, I grew up in Cape Breton, had never heard of Nyanza until this brewery. Now I know exactly where it is. But let me admit that, so there's so much to say about Big Spruce Brewery. It's a rural-based business. It's a huge piece of the farmers market in Cape Breton in Sydney. But what I love most about it, and what I love most about farmers markets, is the sense of place and the pride of place that they have. So let me just share the Cape Breton Farmers Market. This is a tartan that was made at the Gaelic College for Big Spruce. This is a new beer that they've created, which is based on a recipe from Alexander Graham Bell. And that's just a great shot of beer and lobster. Yeah.
We do it right in Cape Breton. We do it right.
Where's the samples?
Well, that's great, and I'm really sorry to cut you off, Keltie. It's great information, and I think that just proves the point of all the wealth in Nova Scotia, and that's the passion and the community champions. And really, the rest doesn't matter when you've got that. But I'm going to take a minute and share with you the story about Really Local Harvest from New Brunswick, and then we'll hopefully have some time for questions. So basically, Really Local Harvest is a farmer cooperative, started in 2000, and in 2005 they started the Dieppe Farmers Market. So First of all, farmers got together, what can we work together, and then started, developing their marketing venues. And why we're going to talk about them today is about their farm to cafeteria program. So they have a mission, so it's also about sustainable agriculture, so they're looking to the future. And their mandate then is to promote members, products, and the co-op as a whole, and to promote sustainable practices while providing tools to increase profitability, and then to represent the interest of members. And I think this is kind of an important thing, this value statement, and I did a lot of research on the website and also talked to Patrick, who was not able to be here. But I'm not going to be here tomorrow to take part in some of the governance sessions, and I think it's so important. It's very important for us to work together, but then it's also important for us to develop that understanding with each other. And so to me, when I see this value statement on the website, I know that they've had some difficult conversations probably. What are we trying to do, and how are the ways that we want to do it? Quality agriculture price products at a fair price. So, determining what a fair price is. They're talking about sustainable agricultural practices, and that would be a discussion about what they are. Negotiations based on the mutual interests of all parties. When I worked with Mennonite community to put the auction together, you kind of might not see your benefit right away, and so there has to be an agreement that we're going to kind of stay the course. Decision making by consensus. So we're going to keep working at the answer until we got one that everybody can believe in. So just really important when we talk about getting together is those rules of engagement. So what is unique here is the Farm to Cafeteria program, and it's quite exciting. And it was actually motivated by the school system themselves. They felt the nutrition and the quality of the food was not complementary to their students. And so they made the initial decision that they needed to do something different. And I, again, don't have the precise history about what happened here, but obviously developing a relationship with Truly Local. What else they did was they developed a not-for-profit food service element. So each of their schools now have food service people that are not part of one of those larger companies, but it's a not-for-profit, so a social enterprise. So we're doing two things: we're providing jobs and we're being able to fulfill our values through providing nutritional and healthy local food. So. And then terroir and food agri-marketing is the distributor. So we have the farmers here and we have the school here, but we still need that piece in between to make the connection. And actually, it's Patrick's business. So he was initially a member of the farmer co-op and added this to basically his portfolio. So he's the one that aggregates and then distributes. And then they've also engaged dietitians to develop healthy and interesting menus, all within the same budget as before. So certainly it'd be great to have some more of those details. So they feel they've been successful. I think it started in 2013, and for 2014-15 they estimated 8 to 10% of students would participate. Well, they saw that there was 20%. And they saw that the teachers and other staff were eating in the cafeteria. The cafeteria's workers themselves were feeling good about the food that they were serving, so great things. The farmers themselves increased their their sales to the system by 63%, so great things. And they began with 20 schools, and they're now managing 27 schools. So, and this is a quote from Patrick. It was in the Rustic magazine, but and I think this is a real leverage point for us. We're doing this to, and that was the motivation of the school board, was for the kids. Kids whose schools source from terroir foods and agri-marketing and really local harvest are learning where and how food is produced and are becoming knowledgeable and even excited about it. Even teachers and staff eat in the cafeteria now. They didn't before. The main thing I hear is that the quality of food is wonderful now. And we've all heard the stories about school food. So, and just a few statistics, related to the project, and this was the 2013-14 year, so they've expanded since then. 36 full-time jobs, over $1 million in increased GDP, and I think gross output, and this is just me reading between the lines, but I think that's auxiliary business, right? Complementary business to that, purchase of the product. They had an initial grant of about $100,000 from the provincial government, and they did have a federal grant as well, because sometimes these projects do need some facilitation, and it is in my small community. We're trying to convince the municipal leaders that to invest in volunteers is the best investment they'll ever make. I mean, the impact goes on and on. So 70 cents of every dollar spent goes to the farmer, and that's a huge difference between the conventional food system. But that's also recognize the fact that in-between piece does cost some money. We do need to invest in it. And for every dollar spent by the students and customers within the school remains in the New Brunswick economy. So very successful. What are some of the other things that are happening? The terroir, and I think I got the numbers or the first letters mixed up, but anyways, they've developed a basket program. So, people similar to a CSA, you can order your product because they've got the infrastructure now for aggregation and distribution. So they're opening markets. So potential increased sales. And the farmers are starting to feel secure and investing. They're hiring more people, and they're investing in new infrastructure like greenhouses and growing tunnels and abattoirs, etc. So we asked Patrick to give us an idea of what he thought was important when you start a project like this. And it starts with collecting the information. So this didn't happen overnight. It was a great deal of thought and planning. And to plan to build a very strong and conservative 3 to 5 year business plan and try to anticipate what could happen. I mean, certainly that's it's called vision or sight. We can't all do it, but just to understand what could go wrong. And again, diversifying the income. And then on an operational level, let's be as efficient as possible. Save on each expense, and really pay attention to the details. And this is an interesting graph, and this is what Patrick shared with us. And so it's based on the research in this report from Michael Schumann. And so he's used some, and I'm not sure where the numbers came from, but he's used some New Brunswick figures. And then over 5 years, what it might result in. And then he's used, because of course shale gas is an issue all over, compared the growing of the local food economy to shale gas production. And I would suggest the local food economy is the winner by far when you look at this. So anyways, that was Patrick's way to keep our minds going. So, and that's all I have there. So we've got about 20 minutes for questions. So we're certainly glad to share whatever you'd like to talk about. Let's start over here. Do we have a mic, a roaming mic? Sure.
Hi there. Thank you for. Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for great presentations. I think what you're doing is just amazing. As you were presenting, I had in my head a question about institutional sales and corporate sales, and it was great that the last presentation hit on that point about selling to public institutions and how and with one decision you can have a huge impact. I'm just wondering if you've got any traction within Nova Scotia around, all the publicly funded cafeterias, universities, community college, hospitals, schools. Has that? I mean, I know that it sounds like what you've been focusing on is kind of consumer demand, but have you kind of explored the other side of it as well?
Do you have anything to start with? Yeah.
So, so the project I'm working on is working with consumers on all levels, so institutions, restaurants, festivals, retail stores, and also individual consumers. So what we're finding with our institutions, they're extremely supportive and extremely interested, but it's like, it's a big ship and it's slow to move, right? So so right now with our university, we have a graduate student who's actually going through all of the orders for a year to find out like what exactly they are purchasing and kind of picking out the low-hanging fruit of what could be sourced locally and then what the potential is, and then we can kind of work back with the producers on that. But there are some great examples, right? So Dalhousie University is doing some good things. Acadia, right, has like the farm.
I don't know, actually.
Okay. Mount A, is it? Okay. Yeah, okay. And I just found out like 2 days ago that one of the NSCC campuses, which one is totally escaping my mind right now. However, one of them is sourcing a lot of their food locally. Like I think they said all of their protein is now being sourced locally. So there's definitely movement happening, absolutely. But like I said, it's a slow shift, and part of the reason is because of the contracts with the food service providers and also with the distributors. So, for an example, with some of the larger distributing, like the trucking companies, like the proteins have to be coming from a federally inspected plant in order for them to carry them, right? So that's a big issue in Nova Scotia. So there's but it's an excellent point. So we have to. It's just going to take us some more work to get there, I think.
With the Premier being here this morning, I was just thinking what a great economic development policy it would be to mandate every publicly funded institution to buy local food.
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
it's too bad he left so soon.
I just want to comment on that element of public procurement. And I think this is something that people are not fully aware of, but part of the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement with Europe limits our ability to define public procurement. Right. And I think that's part of what happens with trade is the give and take. And so, and what happens then, if we have these policies, we have companies that can come to say that we weren't able to bid or whatever, and then there's litigation, and that's, we see it in the lumber industry and things like that. So, CETA is pretty well passed without Canadians knowing details or really being able to comment on it. But it's part of the whole conversation. So when we're talking about local, we do need to drill down and understand what we're trying to replace and, what that power structure looks like. So anyways.
I was going to add one other note on that, and maybe it's something coming up in the fisheries session here today, but I had been part of a group gathering to talk about fisheries and how to have more Nova Scotia fish and shellfish accessible to consumers here. And one of the examples of people that had been brought up to speak was from the New England area, and I'm forgetting the name of the group at the moment, but they had one of the groups that they targeted was actually healthcare providers, and they went with a strategy of leveraging that term "do no harm," which is used in healthcare. And they said, if you're committed to do no harm, and yet your practices around what you're bringing in and serving in the hospital are harmful to our environment, to the health of our community, then you're completely not in alliance with that. And that was a tactic that the strategy they took, and it's been really effective in their area with a lot of hard work. But it's an interesting perspective on it.
Thank you, everyone. Two things. In terms of just what was mentioned there about litigation concerns and market issues, I'd just like to turn around just quickly for a second and say, if we looked back, 50 years, 100 years, what about the litigation possibilities or even about like how systematically food has been taken farther and farther away from us through big business like oil and gas, big grocery and stuff like that. I mean, if there's a definite need and for people to be better connected to food and good food, and it's not being provided by the current system, and it's actually been stripped away from us over, you know, a 50-year period, then I would use that as an argument to say, well, you know, this is where things are going to be turning around, and you better get on board because this movement's building. The other thing I just want to highlight in terms of an opportunity to build greater partnerships, an example that I came across before in terms of transportation and logistics is a group that started in Ontario, and it's called Trucks for Change. And so in the logistics industry, there's this term called bobtailing, and it's something that every trucking group tries to avoid, and that's driving with empty trucks or trailers. And they're all over the place, and the data is somewhat hidden, but there's enough trucks moving around that are empty that can be harnessed and used for delivery of goods that we're talking about here for good purposes and community building. So I hope that this Trucks for Change type nonprofit organization touches down in the Maritimes as well. And there's certainly groups and trucking industry champions, I think, that would get on board and maybe even handle some of those logistics in partnership. And finally, I guess another perspective or another opportunity that I also imagine that I just like to share with the group and put in the minds of everyone is how to get those big partners on board, like the grocery chains and or gas stations, for instance. And one thing that I've noticed, just like school cafeteria food is like gas station food is like disgusting, you know? And so, I mean, I try to avoid having to use a gas station altogether, but sometimes you have to, but the food is crap. And so one thing that I came upon in projects that I worked on was this, one of those like, here's some money, all kinds of people like try and get a bunch of social media campaigns to try and win this money and do your project, and it was called Fueling Change. And an idea that came up in people talking about this contest and sort of annoyed by all the work that you had to do to get like a 50 grand little grant or something was, you know, all the publicity that's generated for these big companies. And so we were thinking, well, imagine if you came up with an ad or something that's, you know, in line with this, the rules of the Fueling Change contest, and it was really about somebody arriving at a gas station, but they might be walking or on a bicycle, right? And they go inside, and they didn't go to the fuel pump or anything like that. They go and walk in, and they want like a fuel source, some food, real good food, like a banana, or I guess in Maritimes we'd be talking about apples or something, right? And they go into the gas station, they buy an apple, they walk out, you know, they're already done the apple because they've generated the appetite of walking and biking and stuff like that. And then they recycle the apple or compost it, and then the ad comes up, you know, fueling change, changing fuel, you know.
Hi, this is a great presentation. Thanks. I'm from New Brunswick. I grew up in a family farm. We went through the whole thing of going from mixed farming to, you know, seen the whole thing of corporatism taking over. We all know about the McCains and New Brunswick and all this. It is freaking hard work, you know, to grow stuff. And if you have animals and you're stuck at home, you know, I grew up in a family with 12 kids, so that was kind of like the labor force there. But, like, I love this local food movement, the, you know, shop local, eat local. But who the hell is going to grow it? You know, how are we going to, because, you know, like, you don't just crap around and do stuff and go for coffee. You know, like, it is a very hard livelihood. And I really get scared. I'm really terrified at how this is going to transition. I hope the heck that we can get monopolies off the land. But, you know, like, we can start to get really to romanticize, you know, what that might look like. But I don't know if you know, a younger generation, I would encourage them to do it. Not the kind of farming that's going on today. And the NFU, I'm glad that to learn that you're from there, because that was probably the only thing that saved my sanity throughout the 70s, seeing so many farmers getting knocked off, you know, the farm. Because at least they understood. They had an understanding what the process was and what was going on. They were talking about genetic modification back in the time when people thought that was total science fiction and they were all making it up. But it's all happened. But anyway, not to be a downer here, but how do you see, like, people, younger people, being supported to get into farming on a hopefully smaller scale?
So the one thing I find that's really inspiring to me, and that's part of the way the NFU is operating, we do have young, vibrant farmers that are sharing, you know, the way they do things. And when we talk about commodity agriculture, they talk about innovation, and it's attached to chemicals and mechanization, but there's huge amounts of innovation in local production. You know, there's great tools. You know, there's great ways to intensively use the land. There's great ways to save labor. There's great ways to market. Like, there's great stuff there. And, you know, the reality is the other system that's only 2 generations old is based on fuel and chemicals. Both the fuel, we're not sure how long we're going to have it, and the chemicals, we're not sure about that long-term effective. So it is a hard life, and again, if the costs don't get paid, you know, it is our food source. There might be some transition that you know, is going to be a crisis, and I think Keltie had something to say.
Yeah, just a couple of things come up for me. One would be it was what Susan Witt was sharing with us just before we ended up here was amazing. The idea of community-supported agriculture, which often I use when I'm trying to explain to someone who hasn't participated or doesn't know about it. I've often used the term like a food box. And in listening to Susan, I realized that shortcut is really taking away the point of community-supported agriculture, because the point of community-supported agriculture is to experience the season with the farmer. And so you're not guaranteed a box of food every week, which is where the community supported agriculture tends to go because of our market system. Instead, you're saying, I'm sharing the risk with you. And we need to really, I think I need to not use that shortcut. You know, community supported agriculture is not just a food box. It's really that piece of community supported. It's sharing that risk. And I think what Susan was talking about today, expanding it beyond agriculture, but certainly expanding it further in agriculture, gives people the opportunity to farm. And, you know, it's always still going to take someone who's willing to do back-breaking physical work. And that's not everyone in our society. But if we can offer up those opportunities in an accessible way. There are people who love that outdoor work, that the idea of sitting at a computer sounds terrible. I mean, and then I just wanted to say that in this room, there are 2 fantastic growers, Claire and George from Cape Breton. And they're an example of people growing still for their community and also wild harvesting. And then also Anna is a young farmer. And I know she's got lots of reasons on why she does what she does. So, yeah.
And I just want to add to it, I think Francine, if I can see your name right. Yeah. I'm really glad you brought this up. And this is something that we don't talk about. And I think it goes even further than what you brought up, right? And it's not only the extremely difficult work of creating the products, but now like we expect farmers to do everything. So they have to do all of their marketing, all their advertising. They have to drive their products all over the place. They have to stand at farmers markets for 5 hours. They have to do everything. So I think we need a better food system in place so that we can take some of that work away and say, okay, produce the food, and we will, in our communities, find ways to deal with the other pieces of this.
Hello, I'm Diane Savoie, and I'm also from New Brunswick. And I live in the community where La Récolte de Chez Nous started, and where the first school was, with the school to cafeteria. Kathy and I are here, and we both work for a development group and for food autonomy. And we're also the founders of Slow Food Kokang Acadie, which was the first slow food convivium in New Brunswick. most of the Slow Food members are also members of La Récolte de Chez Nous. So we're very close, and we work very closely together. But I just wanted to tell you some of the offshoots of La Récolte and what happened with School to Cafeteria is that many of the schools now have gardens, and they also have cooking, after-hours cooking classes working with real local food. And I was in the community when the first cafeteria started, and they went from 1 cafeteria 1 year to 20 the next September. So that's going like running 1 restaurant to 20 in a month. So it was a little hectic at the beginning. They did a great job working around this. And they had to retrain all of the food service workers who were used to just opening cans and bags. Yeah. So they had to be retrained also. So the project was enormous. And we are enormously proud of them. Mm-hmm. And I was disappointed when I saw that Patrick wasn't here this morning, but you did such a great job. And the next step, we hope, will be food in our hospitals.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Thank you.
That's great. So I think we'll take one last question, and then if any of us speakers have a burning issue that we have to get out there yet, then we can.
Hi, I won't take up too much time, but I just wanted to respond to some of the institutional questions that have it, actually just building off that last comment right there. Sorry. Oh, my paperwork. My name's Leon. I live on the south shore of Nova Scotia in the town of Bridgewater, and I actually work for the town, but for a period of time I served on the District Health Authority board before the boards were all axed. And I'm very proud to say that our board really took a lead in creating organizational policies around food and seeing that as a way to inspire other health districts to create position statements on food. And our board actually agreed that local and healthy food are both key to promoting health in the population. So there's been a lot of leadership work done to promote that within the health system. And now that the boards are all fused, some people are actually carrying that work forward into the provincial health system. So let's really pray that that will continue, because I think that that's key. And please do what you can to support your health boards, even on the local level, and the community health boards, whatever role they're going to have in promoting that, because it is within the system and people do care. The other thing is that, just on the note of municipalities, because I work for one, is that the province instituted a sustainable procurement policy. I believe it's 2 years ago. And part of that is that municipalities can now spend up to 5% more on locally sourced product without having to go to the lowest cost. They can actually add 5% to the cost of tenders and quotes as long as it's local. So there is movement happening within Nova Scotia on this on the institutional front. I'd say that that's just a great place to continue that work. Yeah.
Thanks, Leon.
We just have Joan.
Doing your own gardening, promoting.
Obviously, I'm a pushover, so here we go. Another comment, a question.
Hi, my name is George Kehoe, and proud to say that I'm from Cape Breton. And I'm a retired school teacher. Been retired for 22 years now, and my wife and I raised 6 children, and we had to raise our own food. Mm-hmm. Now, what I'd like to address is, why is it that all these local initiatives are so good for the economy? Because I don't think, like, everything I've heard here is correct. But why is it correct? All right? Well, I'd like to start a little rumor. A gentleman goes up to the Prime Minister and he says, Mr. Prime Minister, there's an environmental group in Nova Scotia and they've just taken 30 economists hostage and they're threatening to shoot them. And the Prime Minister contemplates for a while and he says, well, it's a start. All right? I study economics at university, and if my instructor is a typical example of those guys, yeah, they should be shot. Every time he came to a graph, he said, I never understood graphs, so you figure it out for yourself. Anyhow, here I read this 40 years ago in a book written by a Scottish engineer. But the way he presented it was complicated, and I found it very difficult to explain, even though I understood it. So I think I have a better way of approaching that. If I go into business and I have 2 employees, and I spend $200,000 a year running my business, I'm spending that into the local economy. But at the end of the year, I want that $200,000 back, and I want my profit. So maybe I want $260,000 back. All right? Every business is the same. Every business wants to take more from the economy than they put in. And there isn't anything wrong with that, because we're not going to go in business if we don't make a profit. So the thing is, the local money supply has to be increasing. If it's not increasing, some business is going to go out of business. All right? Now, in our Constitution, the British North America Act, the federal government was given the responsibility of regulating the money supply. But the international banking community have frigged that up, in simple terms. But what can we do about it? Instead of spending our money on products from outside the province, we spend our money within the province. And then our exports brings money in that allows our money supply to grow. It's that simple. So if I have a hoscap bush in my backyard, and in 3 years' time I harvest enough fruit to get 1 jar of jam, that 1 jar of jam may be worth $10 at the farm market, but it's worth $10 to our local economy, even if I consume it myself, because I have $10 to spend somewhere else. Thank you for your time.
You know what? I'm going to suggest that we're all available for further conversation. And I just wanted to leave you with the thought that this conversation about localizing is going on all over the world. And so the proponents of trade as the answer are going to find, that relocalization, and that's kind of influence some of the things that happen. So, just take that thought with you. Anything to offer?
I think I'm out of thoughts, but it's great to see all the excitement and interest in this area. So together we will change the world.
Yeah, and I think the only other thing I would add, is that there is a fisheries session going on, and part of the message that was in the book was the idea that fish is food, and I think that that's really important. We're starting to hold our those in the room at least, and hopefully our bubble is spreading. We're starting to hold our farmers up with great respect and admiration that's well deserved, and that will help them decide to put in those long hours. But we need to hold our fisher people up that way as well, and we're not yet there in Nova Scotia. So I think that's an area of our food system that we can even start by, talking about your local fishermen and the amazing work they're doing.
Yeah, and I think too, when we're adding to that thought, we hunt, we gather, we garden. Those are all parts of our food system as well. So, anyways, enjoy your lunch.